Hi guys, and welcome back to F1 Fanatics. I'm Mike.
And I'm Ash.
And we're back together in terms of it. We were obviously last there for our race preview, and we've just given you videos all over what was a fantastic weekend at the British Grand Prix, and now we're back for our kind of full in-depth review.
Yeah, definitely going to be able to have more of that chat aspect that we may have lost a little bit over the weekend, but we're going to go back to our usual tag team effect.
I think dream tag team, there we go. Right guys, so I think the only way to do this for this weekend is to go straight into it, and I'm going to start with one word, and that's wow. What
Definitely.
a race we had.
Yes, and the guy behind me with that celebration shows exactly what the fans were wanting, having that celebration effect. But this is just one story from a whole catalogue from the race. You can pick a lap, and from there was definitely something happening. So definitely got quite a lot to talk about in this video. We won't go on for too long for some of it so that we can keep it down, but
we'll try not to waffle, but we like a good waffle.
It happens sometimes.
Indeed we do. And so, like I said, we'll first off talk about Lewis Hamilton. So, record 6th victory at Silverstone. He then equals the record number of wins at home Grand Prix with Alan Prost. So he has a chance to break one this year. And we predicted a Lewis win.
I think most people predicted a Lewis win. It was something that was quite clear.
It might not have been that rogical. But
yeah, it's not the most difficult of predictions, especially with the Mercedes car and then Lewis's history at Silverstone. But the way it happened, I don't think anyone was going to predict that. It definitely wasn't a predictable race, despite the results seen in it.
Certainly wasn't. We definitely had our first bit of drama, which I think we're first notably got to be with is probably moving on to Hamilton and Bottas themselves in the race.
That battle that we saw, it was very good. Both cars driving on rails at times. They could throw that car into corners and it just seemed to have been planted. It was as if it was a scale electric. It was that controlled from the two of them.
And the way that the early exchanges between them, you were like Hamilton's ahead, and then Bottas managed to hold on. Then we saw the return of Bottas 2.0.
Exactly. Hamilton, from the start, it was, as I said in the roundup of the race, he wanted that overtake done and dusted as soon as possible. And Bottas, well, we've all been calling for it, and this season he's given it to us. He is now challenging Hamilton as much as he can, and
I think that was his most competitive in a race. It's certainly the way.
I would say it was his most aggressive race. I think would probably be the way to go.
I think he wanted this one. I think he knew if he was managed. Obviously, he didn't, but if he had managed to kind of secure that win ahead of Lewis, that's psychological, because when you think Silverstone, you think Lewis Hamilton.
And I think definitely in the post-race interviews, we did go back to almost that dejected Bottas from last season. And I think Hamilton has just turned that screw to its maximum now. And whilst Bottas is definitely having that competitive edge, I think he's a little bit resigned to the fact that the 6th title is more than likely going to be going to Hamilton.
I think there's going to need to be a few swings later in the season and maybe a few mechanical failures,
which isn't in Mercedes' DNA really. You don't get Mercedes doesn't really have mechanical failures. So.
Also looking at Bottas, he's not as bad as Romain Grosjean, but if we're looking at unlucky drivers on the grids,
compared to teammate, he's definitely, I would put him up there as probably being the most unlucky driver on the grid. When you compare the driver lineups.
I mean, last year was the pinnacle of those kind of unluckies, like the punctures when leading the race. And
exactly, and I think a little bit of that has started to creep in a bit more again this season.
We'll get on to the one today that he was unlucky on.
But over the season, I would probably say the only race where you can say he hasn't had some aspect of being unlucky compared to Lewis was probably Austria. Yeah. Other than that, you can look at little bits in the race and say that could have gone better for him. Even in Australia, there were times where things could have gone a little bit smoother, but admittedly that weekend he did absolutely boss it, didn't he? But yes, he's definitely up there with the unluckiest.
He certainly is. And I think that nicely fits kind of finishing our look at that early look at the Mercedes start and onto what was my personal favourite part of the race. Was it was an absolute frantic first half of the race, and the pinnacle was probably this battle between Leclerc and Verstappen. And Leclerc had clearly taken it on the chin. Verstappen's come out and gone, the way he raced shows that he's not quite over Austria, because he's like, if you're gonna race like that, Verstappen, I'm gonna match you.
I don't think he was, and I think it is the fact that obviously it was a big step up for Leclerc going into that Ferrari this season, and you can look at it and say the team hasn't been 100% on his side, and I would also look at it and say there's been a little bit of naivety with some of his driving. He has looked at times
he's a nice guy, Leclerc.
He is.
He seems to have done a little bit of that translated on the track.
Exactly, and I think some of the times when he's come over the radio and it's been putting himself down, when in reality it hasn't been him. Yeah. So I would say it's almost like that period we had last year with Verstappen in the maturing as a driver. I think Leclerc's recognised the fact that
that's huge difference between here in Austria.
Exactly.
In terms of that maturity, huge difference.
If Leclerc drove like he did on Sunday in Austria,
he would have won.
That first race win was there, and it is almost as if the decision's been made now. Max has set those battle lines, and Leclerc is well and
truly matched to it. And I think there was just kind of little nasty late moves on the breaking point, wasn't it?
A few of them were
a little bit naughty.
A few of them were Max Verstappen-esque. Like when you think about when he first came into Formula One,
Max.
And it was really good to see. You can look at that race and clearly say that the Red Bull was the faster car in race trim. And how Leclerc was able to keep Verstappen behind him in particular in that first stint, especially not on the right tyre. Let's be honest. I think Ferrari went the wrong way.
Ferrari's clever, different strategy to everyone else. Apparently didn't work off.
I think there was a reason why everyone else picked the mediums as the starting tyre.
I suppose what you have to look at is, obviously, Mercedes is that kind of sweet point in the setups. Red Bull is the more downforce one of the twos. Obviously, Ferrari has the least downforce out of them. So you can maybe see the setup in terms of that. But it just seems they're trying something. And again, their strategy hasn't quite gone right.
For me, it did seem a little bit of desperation. And almost they've accepted the fact that they're not going to have a car this season that is as quick as the Mercedes, and the only way they're going to be able to find that result is through some random strategy that no one else can see working. We say that Leclerc did very well to keep his tyres alive for as long as he did, and Vettel actually extended his stint on the softs.
He certainly did, yeah. He went
it could work. It was one of those where it could have worked.
And he did keep Verstappen behind, and the only thing that kind of stopped him was the thing, moving on to it, was the pit. And Formula One, obviously, a lot of it is the drivers, and we all love the drivers there, but it is a team sport. There's a hell of a lot of a team that goes behind it.
Well, Hamilton was saying, like, Hamilton always says about how many people there are, and he said this weekend that for his car alone, there's about 2,000 people.
That's crazy, isn't
as a combined effort. So it does show that, yes, we see the picture of the drivers and them being the athlete.
Tip of the iceberg image, isn't it? The drivers, the tip of the iceberg that sits above the water, and then the rest of the team is everything you don't see behind
exactly.
the scenes.
So, and the pit stop phase showed the team effort.
It was a world record of the fastest pit stop Red Bull, and you can tell it was exceptionally quick.
It needed to be, and you can have a look at the pit stop itself and the Red Bull release, because I know that there were some people that were saying, how is the Monaco incident a penalty and this not? You obviously did have a couple of the McLaren engineers breathing in, making themselves as thin as possible, but I would say the main thing to look at with that pit stop is there wasn't the contact, and it was controlled from, like, both Leclerc and Verstappen were very controlled in their exits. So
there is although they're very aggressive, there is a respect between the two.
Exactly, and I think,
and also I think everyone might have just been carried away, because I remember just watching it. I mean, obviously, Ashley, you watched it live, and I watched it today on replay, and I was enthralled. I was edge of my seat.
The one thing I would say about the race that did bring it down, like the tiniest amount, Sky. Yeah. Some of the times when they decided to cut away from things, like they did it for the Hamilton and Bottas when they were going side by side, they cut away and you didn't see the whole battle. The pit stop itself, you only saw towards the end of it. You didn't see the initial. It wasn't until replays that you actually saw Verstappen leaving the pit box. So it was one of those where they could have cut some of the images a little bit better, but you can't have it take away from what was an amazing spectacle, really.
And you just go back, you go, what an amazing pit stop world record. They put it in, and then Verstappen just out the pits. Was it the first or the second corner outside the pit?
Third or fourth, actually. I think it was a little bit further around, but
and he just went wide on an exit to a corner, didn't he? And opened that door to Leclerc, and he did not need a second invitation.
And the best picture from the weekend that shows that has got to be the Red Bull engineers. You get that celebration of a team effort, well done, and then the despair. It was something that was mentioned, the other day in the video. Verstappen wasn't as smooth as he's been recently with those cooler tyres and just easing into his stint. I think there was that little bit of excitement in the fact of what had happened, and it didn't help that they had other cars that they were having to get past at that time. But
it wasn't the perfect pit window, was it?
No, it wasn't, but it was one of those where they needed it, really.
Well, I think Gasly had come in the lap before, hadn't he? And I'm pretty sure he was trying to undercut Vettel.
It was the fact that the undercut was there, and for Vettel in the end, it obviously would have had other things not happened, there would have been quite a big undercut on Vettel. But yeah, it just was that initial get going. It was something where we don't normally talk about that sort of thing with Max Verstappen.
No.
Especially, I would say probably since Monaco last year, definitely. Yeah. He's always been great at switching the tyres on and easing himself into, because I think it is something that in the Red Bull itself it is needed. That it's not a car that switches the tyres on. On the grid at the moment, I would probably say the Mercedes and the McLaren are probably the best two cars at switching those tyres on quite quickly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with, the McLaren's looking at very good.
but
the car so far.
that Red Bull just doesn't, and it's the same. It's the same with the Ferrari as well to some extent. They can't seem to get the tyres into that window as easily, and I think that's obviously the reason why they're looking to go back to the old spec tyres. I don't think that's necessarily going to slow the Mercedes down as much as is expected.
It's just not happening, is it?
No,
There is no guarantee to it, and it's just not happening. I think now comes the next stage, which had a big impact on a lot of drivers in the race, and this was this man Giovinazzi, and that's me actually getting the pronunciation of his name right. I usually go Giovinazzi, but there is an O in there, so Giovinazzi. How goes from there? It was a silly mistake, really. I think he just got on the throttle a little bit earlier, lost the back end, spun on the gravel trap, and then bam, stalled out the game.
I think it was more the fact that he sort of beached himself as well, really, didn't he?
That's what the gravel traps are there for. It punishes driver error, doesn't it?
Yeah,
that's why we like more.
Complete
of them,
combination, really. Rookie mistake, really. I think it's one of those you wouldn't have seen a more experienced driver doing it.
He was just trying to push his car a little bit more, and he got it wrong. And Silverstone tends to be a track that does punish you. It is more of the technical, difficult tracks on the circuit, for sure.
It is, and obviously it was in a position where virtual safety car or safety car, there wasn't really another option. There was always that danger of
like a beached well, it wasn't going to be easy to move.
No, and there was always, I think, there are times where safety cars have been brought out and you're thinking, really, for that? In this situation?
You kind of understood, because if they were clearing it, there were going to be marshals and stuff and thing, and if someone else had made a mistake, then
exactly.
You go in.
So I think they potentially virtual safety car may have been enough, but you can also see the argument for having that full course safety car. It did mean that it was able to be controlled, and it was that all of the cars would have been passing at the same time. So it did allow for the marshals to do their job as they do.
What they're there to do. So I suppose moving on to the safety car itself. And so this had a big impact on some people's races. And there were some big winners and big losers, and the losers really was no fault of their own, really.
The only one where you can argue that there was some aspect of fault is Leclerc, but that would be on the team rather than...
Yeah, it was Ferrari rather than himself. That's why he was a loser. It wasn't a loser because of the safety car when it was a loser because they were like, oh, Vettel, he can get back in the race, and then they go...
we have got
another driver.
So yeah, and I think when you listen to the team radio, it's quite clear that Leclerc wasn't happy about that, and rightly so.
Nor should he be happy about it. I mean,
definitely.
We'll come on to that a little bit later on from there. But the winners for me were Hamilton, because if he had pitted without a safety car, he would have been behind Bottas. The way he was and the way he desperately wanted that win, you'd probably say he's still going to win the race, but you don't know. He would have been behind Bottas, but he'd gone long enough in that stint that he would have been one stop anyway. Exactly. And Bottas was always on the 2 stop.
Exactly, because of Bottas already having that stop for the second set of mediums, he had to have that second stop no matter what happened.
That gap would have been smaller, and he might have been able to get closer with the thing. But you don't know. This is all ifs, buts.
It's all ifs, buts, exactly. But
basically, Hamilton got ahead.
I think that's the thing. Hamilton is a winner because he gained that position, and the minute Hamilton was in that position, you knew that he wasn't, unless he had some fault or something like that, you didn't really see him not winning.
Exactly.
But as you say, he'd extended that first stint long enough that in all likelihood he probably would have still had the race win without the safety car. it's then dropping back to that midfield for the next winners, isn't it?
It is indeed, and Sainz, Kvyat and Raikkonen for me were the big winners because they'd all extended that first stint, and then they get what they describe in the Sky commentary as kind of like a free pit stop, because obviously when you usually pit, you've got your competitors going around 200 mile an hour on the thing, and obviously with the safety car, they're down into a limit on their speed, so therefore you can slot in, and the risk to the time, you may take that initial, you go back a few places from there, but it's not going to be as drastically
You're
a loss.
close, aren't you?
Exactly.
Even if you lose track position by a couple of places, by coming out in that safety car train, you're not having to battle your way as much.
And you can guarantee there'll be a few laps. So like all of them, Sainz, Kvyat and Raikkonen did, they then switched to the one-stop strat, and then they just went to the end of the race, which meant their competitors had to pit around them. And
I think that's what caused the losers really from that safety car. It wasn't necessarily that they'd got the wrong strategy, or it was more the fact, because of them allowing the cheaper pit stop on top of that one stop, it
was almost like a double whammy, like, there you go, sucker for you coming in before the pit stop, and have another blow that you've got to go then pit again.
Exactly, and it was one of those where you feel for the drivers at times.
You certainly do.
So
I think the main ones that I've got here are Norris, Albon, and obviously Bottas himself. Their Albon, we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but he had an issue with his car that also kind of compounded like a double whammy, and which I spoke about in the practice sessions and qualifying, how he looked strong all weekend, because obviously he had a fantastic qualifying session.
Both him and Norris had looked brilliant.
Superb, and it was unlucky, especially in, Albon obviously represents Thailand, but he's British born and grown up in there, so it's essentially both their first home Grand Prix, and probably what could have won for them.
Yeah, it definitely was, and you know that they're part of that young breed of F1 driver. They're gonna have those opportunities in the future.
Certainly.
But you only get one first, don't you? And it would have been nice, I think, especially for Lando, it would have been nice to have seen a decent chunk of points. His performance in that McLaren has been amazing. I think
nothing short of exceptional, hasn't it?
He's deserved the contract extension, and it is once again something a little bit out of his control. But
you're going to get that as a race driver. You've got to take the rough with the smooth, haven't you? And some days that might benefit you from another driver.
Exactly. Had he not performed as well in qualifying, then he may have been in Carlos Sainz's position, and it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it? You get it in your favour sometimes, but today it wasn't. So
yeah, and I suppose that now the other loser where we mentioned was Leclerc moving on to, when he came out, was his because they kind of almost forgot that Leclerc was there. It then meant that he was behind Pierre Gasly, and Gasly, he's had a superb weekend.
He did,
hasn't he? And he needed this desperately. I mean, we were talking about, we were surprised he still had the drive, but
yes, it's a surprise that Red Bull have stuck with him, especially considering how they do like to chop and change. I'm definitely one of those that feels there isn't a better option out there at this moment in time.
And you know what? If he proves what he's done this and he carries on being within that top six for the rest of the season, I think that's all you can ask for Gasly.
Well, Christian Horner was saying at the beginning of the weekend that he has taken that step away and has actually thought about his style of driving and what's best for him, and it has. We can't say it's changed completely, but this weekend there was something different. I don't know whether it was necessarily the track suit.
Well, I think it's preference to Silverstone. He won a Formula 2 at this track, and he knows it well. So I think a lot of times with drivers, it's their kind of success that they have, at a certain track, that builds that kind of inner confidence, and to know that he succeeded in this, and he knew he needed a big kind of result, and this was probably the perfect track that he needed. After
it is
Australia.
a confidence sport, so results like this will build that confidence. I think if you look at the end of the race itself, like, you might be a bit disappointed the fact that Verstappen was getting, like, you know, it's Verstappen had the incident and still was able to close up on him, and it is one of those where
it on a personal level, yes, but I think you have to. He won't inside the sport because he's competing with Verstappen. He knows that, but you have to view Verstappen as an exceptional talent, and what he's getting out of that Red Bull car is, I think Gasly drove the Red Bull to its potential, and Verstappen drives the car to a level above.
He does, but then you've also got to look at it. Your first competition should be your teammate, so that's where he should be looking to get to.
I think he came out afterwards and showing what his standards were. He was a little bit disappointed that he wasn't able to be a bit close to Leclerc and challenge the podium. He felt that it was within him.
This is the start. He's got to use this as his first race of the season, really, and try and kick on now. But it is one of those, he's got to try and find that next level, which he's shown he's a quality driver. It's not as if he's new to the sport and he hasn't got that experience or hasn't necessarily got the ability you're expecting. In the Toro Rosso, he showed that he is a quality driver.
He's always been a quick driver, always all through his career up until this season.
He just needs to find that sweet spot in the Red Bull. Every driver talks about that sweet spot with the cars, and when Gasly finds he's in the Red Bull, I think he's one of those. He's a driver to watch. There's definitely
he's not done yet.
No,
I think someone mentioned he didn't look. I think someone like Paul di Resta had interviewed him after the race, and he didn't look the dejected Kvyat when he was back at Toro Rosso when Verstappen had taken his seat. He still looked like he had fight in him, and he still looked hungry after the media day on Thursday, and had a good weekend. And probably
watch this space is what I think
that's
we're trying to say.
Yeah, watch the space with Gasly. He might not be as finished as what we may have given him discredit for me in particular, last Thursday.
I was going to say, I'm still one of those.
You were a little bit more on the fence. You were a bit more team
give
Gasly.
Give him the chance. I definitely think he deserves it.
On his helmet going, no, get out.
He definitely deserves that opportunity, and I think it's one of those, stick with him and you'll be repaid. I know that in my Formula Fantasy I haven't stuck with him, but in the long term I think we should, and you will get that repayment from him.
And then as part of this fight, we've just picked up Gasly and had a good look at his thing. Oh no, jumped the gun there. Sorry. We'll move back. I was going to talk about my favourite piece of driving of the day when it was the Leclerc overtake on Gasly was... it was like a dance, just the way that they kind of smooth past each other. I can't remember the corner combination. It might have been through Brooklands and Luffield. I could be completely off.
There were lots of moves through that.
But the way that he got up and then went round, and they were so close and didn't touch the respect, giving each other just enough space, and then it was like finished the move.
Like Hamilton and Bottas, the cars were on rails, and especially with Leclerc, I think I was definitely the one that was slating the Ferrari for its downfalls.
You certainly were.
And by no means do I think that has changed based on one race. I still think there's a lot of questions on that Ferrari downfalls. But Leclerc, we get to it later on about his performance, but once again, showing that
it was a superb bit of driving.
He showed his ability.
Again, like we said earlier with that Verstappen, with this as well, it was fierce driving. He's like, I'm getting through here.
I think it was, obviously, he knows the ability of the car. He knows what the car can and can't do. And he was pushing it. I think there was definitely I'm going to go for it. I know the limits of the car, and I'm going to get as close to that as possible, which is what I was saying about the inexperience of Giovinazzi, and with his mistake that led to the safety car, he went over the limit. Leclerc stuck to it, knows where that line is, and touched it a little bit.
Just gave a little tickle on the way through.
Exactly.
Okay, now we can move into
there we go.
Fireworks.
Now we're there.
Drama. Look at that.
That is a great picture.
Look at that airtime from Verstappen there. That is serious there.
Well, that shows the one thing I want.
Is this Formula One or is this rallying now? I'm not sure.
Well, the picture with Verstappen there shows the one thing I want to mention, and
just one.
It's the big one that I want to mention. How did Verstappen come away from that with no suspension damage and finish the race?
And then I'll counter your one big point to my one big point. How was Giovinazzi, who was his little beached well and had to get the thing out? Both these cars kept going. They didn't, other than the momentary stop of we've made contact. They both kept going. No safety car. And
no.
He's massively up in the air, flew into the gravel. Vettel's gone off flying somewhere. I mean, it's miraculous that the carbon fibre, there wasn't really much damage to either car, was there?
Well, you had the scuff, shall we say, right across the front wing of Vettel. But you saying about Giovinazzi getting beached, once again, inexperience. Both of these drivers know what they're doing, and definitely Verstappen, because he was the one that I looked at and thought, he's not getting out of this.
And it should have been roles reversed, shouldn't it? In terms of he was the German out early, putting his towel on the beach, making sure he got the best spot.
Yes, it was nice little, just light on the throttle. Kept the engine going, which obviously with a Formula One car is key, but it was lightly on the throttle, not digging the car in, and well, I said it, and I agreed with Jensen Button, and I don't know what your view is because we haven't actually discussed this yet. I think it was more a fact that Vettel wanted to get back past and got a little bit caught up and missed his braking point. I don't think there was anything to it other than that.
It's a racing instant. It's two blokes going hard. Vettel has made a mistake that probably shouldn't make, but as soon as he got in that slipstream, the kind of margin for error in that braking zone just kind of drastically kind of shortens, and he missed it.
He should have known that gap was always going to close, though. That's the one thing I would say on that. Yes, it was a mistake that he missed his braking point.
Maybe we're seeing the consequences of Leclerc doing well and being out in front of him, and he's going, I need to stay with this kid.
Well, I think I was reading, and I've got to remember the stat. It's the 7th mistake he's made since since the British Grand Prix last year. So that's taking into account the fact he won. So the first mistake he would have made in that sequence would have been
7 is a lot.
So for a four-time world champion, if we were talking about Gasly, let's have a look at it from that
perspective. He'd be out for drive.
If we were talking about Gasly making 7 mistakes in that period of time, he wouldn't have a drive anymore. Go back a few seasons, and Grosjean was suspended for a race because of the incident at Spa. It's one of those where lesser drivers have had bigger consequences for mistakes of that level. So,
because let's be honest here, as much as Leclerc and I think he was the driver of the day, with those kind of battles he was involved in. Verstappen was on the podium there, and
He was.
You can go with spots and maybes. He might have even got close enough to challenge Bottas.
A little bit annoying because I did predict Verstappen
Well,
for
we both
third,
did, didn't we?
so it is annoying.
Cheers,
but
Vettel. That's why wearing the Ferrari top. We have a load of kind of things, and then look, Kimi Räikkönen for the winner of the safety car.
But it was one of those. It was another Vettel mistake, and he's got to be careful now because one, you're always going to look back on it and say Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion. You can't take that away from him. But last year, the pressure of Hamilton in the title challenge led to a lot of the mistakes that he made in the back end of last season. And this season, it's
got to be the pressure of Leclerc, hasn't it?
Well, it's got to be. Because
Ralph Schumacher came out today and was like, if he's not careful, he's going to lose the number 1 spot, and he might be very close to that line anyway at the moment, because as it stands of yesterday's result, Leclerc is 3 points behind.
Well, Ferrari are another one of those teams that don't like mistakes. They're all for the beauty of Formula One, and you go back to Bahrain, where Vettel ultimately made the first mistake of this season when he span when Hamilton went past him. But you can't even say that was necessarily down to the pressure from Hamilton.
No?
I would say that was probably more down to the fact he's gone into the season number 1 at Ferrari. No doubt about that. The radio calls have shown that throughout. So for Leclerc to have been told to stay behind, not only pass him, but to open that gap up in that race.
If we look at the season today, Leclerc is getting more out of that car than Sebastian Vettel. He is more happy with the way that car is set up.
It is set up really nicely for him, and Vettel is now definitely at a stage where I think he's either got to look at it from an outside perspective and see what he thinks is the best way to go back and get himself back to where he was, because you don't turn off class. He is a good driver.
Yeah. Right, you can't win. Although he had a very good car at Red Bull, Mark Webber's still pushing him. He's won 4 world championships. You can't take that away from him.
There's been times where he has got the best out of a car that's not been the greatest, but you're now looking at a stage where he's had enough seasons at Ferrari for that car to have been built around him, because when Kimi was his teammate, Vettel was number 1. The car's been made for him. If you look at the team partnerships, Ricciardo at Renault, he had to come into a car that was designed around Hülkenberg and has had to adapt. You've got Gasly going into a Red Bull that's been designed around Verstappen and having to try and adapt. Leclerc's come into a Ferrari that's been ultimately designed around Vettel as the number 1 driver.
And Vettel does give a lot of technical feedback.
Well, last season it was about the fact that his main issue was that he was trying to be race engineer, team director and driver, and that was one of the reasons why the pressure was getting to him. So it is shown, and he's got to try and take that step back and remember he is the driver. He's there to give feedback on the car,
and then let the engineers,
the
principal get on with it.
But he's got the car designed to him almost, and Leclerc is somehow finding ways.
He's proving.
When you look at it, there's been 10
there was
race
a lot
weekends.
of kind of wasn't there of going, should they go for Leclerc, Kimi, and you're going, no, Ferrari are just doing this move early so they can cover Red Bull and Verstappen. But Leclerc has proven this season he's every bit the driver that people are hoping he would be.
Exactly,
and he was ready for that move.
And there's been 10 race weekends, and from that you can say that at least 50% of those, Leclerc has had a better weekend than Vettel has. And at the start of the season, Vettel was running away with it in terms of the team battle there. So it's now got to a stage where that number 1 seat is available. I don't think Ferrari can look at it as...
They can't keep doing what they did today. Yesterday with the pit stop. That has got to stop, because otherwise Leclerc is going to get seriously upset and they're going to have some serious team issues.
Well, the thing that Ferrari have got to look at is, for them as a team, it's always constructors as being the pinnacle. They're not as fussed as other teams about the drivers' side of things. I think they would take another constructors. This season, they're not going to win that, but they need to get second place. They can't
lose out to the Red Bull.
No, they can't. It would be, I think, a disaster of a season if they do. And
be inclined to agree.
So it's now they've got to start looking at things. Is it worth putting all of their eggs in the Vettel basket as they have been, and continuing to have this issue of mistakes or not actually working the way they're expecting? Do they put all of their baskets in Leclerc, all of their eggs in the Leclerc basket, and risk almost an unknown, or do they go back to the way that all of the fans feel it should be and do a Mercedes? They're free to fight until it gets too far, or the other way that you can look at it, Mercedes control everything so that constructors are sewn up and then do what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the way Mercedes have always looked at it. You're free to battle as long as it's clean.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's always been maximising for the team.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where they've been so dominant. I don't think it's necessarily been the car completely, especially when you look at last season. The domination has come from the fact that as a team they work, and I think that's where Ferrari are now needing to go, because there's something not right at the moment within the camp.
I think the one thing we can agree on there is the German Grand Prix, his home one, is going to be a pretty big one for Sebastian, and I think that's...
And probably after last season, he will want to win it.
He certainly will after that. Slight little accident into a wall. That was a silly mistake, and I think that's actually was the start of his slow decline down this path to where we see Sebastian Vettel today. I think that probably wraps up our main kind of look at the main points from the race. After that, it was there. So this man's, before there was we finish on there, we'll now probably do a quick roundup of kind of some other notable things we want to mention about the race. First of all, starting again with the main man, his last lap on tyres that I think are
30 laps.
30 plus laps.
Yep.
Compared to Bottas's fresh soft tyres. On the last lap of the race, Lewis Hamilton managed to put in a worldie of a lap and get...
It was hammer time.
Bottas is going, oh, Bottas unlucky today. And there you go. There's a little extra bit of kind of suffering for you to lose the fastest lap.
Even better, and it's hard to say because of how good the race was as a whole, but the thing that makes that lap even better was the radio exchange. Them wanting him to... Because the only reason Mercedes were wanting to pit him was to just be safe. There wasn't any reason for him to. They knew those tyres were going to last, and Lewis knew it as well. The thing that shows with that is, even if Bottas had got close to him, the result was in the bag. Because to have the tyre life to do that shows how much he was controlling the race. There's been so many times where Lewis Hamilton does it. He's a lot like Alain Prost, I would say. He does what he needs to do to win. The one thing that I think we can agree on as well is a bit like Niki Lauda as well. You need to finish the race to be able to win, and as long as you're the fastest person across that line, Doesn't matter how long it takes you.
I think his maturity and how he's in his Mercedes years has been a lot with a close friendship he built with the late Niki Lauda, wasn't it? He was very close to him, and I think that now, like you said, reflects a lot in his driving. And that last lap was incredible.
It was, and you so know that it was not something that the team had said that he could go out and do, because
he just knew he could.
Yeah, it's one of those things. He's always been able to do it. The fact that in France at Paul Ricard, he almost managed it, didn't he?
It was 200ths of a second.
Exactly. So he's got that ability, but I think this time, it being to his teammate that made it that little bit sweeter for him.
Certainly, and would have been that extra kick in the teeth of Bottas going, oh God, he's got that as well.
Well, you look at it, and the only thing from this weekend you could say that Hamilton could have made it better for him would have been pole position, but then again, 6,000th of a second.
He's not missed it by far, has he?
No, he hasn't missed. He hasn't missed it by far, and as it was only Leclerc that actually improved on that final run and qualifying. No, I think it's safe to say he had a successful weekend.
Yeah, right. Moving on to, well, we probably need a quicker roundup as we've gone quite in depth.
We have on this one.
Goes from there. Our driver of the day, I think we both agree, was Leclerc. Was what was voted, and I can't really knock that. His driving was sensational and exciting for fans to watch.
Yep, definitely, and it's performances like this that are gonna push him to that number one seat in Ferrari if it carries on.
The best of the rest was Carlos Sainz and McLaren. McLaren still looking strong, which is fantastic to see. And Norris probably would have done well without that previous mentioned safety car thing. And Danny Rick with the Renault actually had a very strong race as well. They looked like they weren't back up there.
They were in there in qualifying.
But after Austria, they'd obviously drifted a bit from the McLaren, and it looked like they closed that gap because it was just Sainz driving so well and exceptional at the end of the race.
It's that midfield battle
that kept Rick.
It's that midfield battle where it's still track dependent, and I know that Carlos Sainz has said that that's the one thing McLaren are now looking at. They want that fourth place as being theirs every race. And obviously that is the battle that all of those midfield teams are going for. But until someone takes that big leap, I think we're still going to be in for really good battles.
Which is exciting. Albon, also Honda came out, I think it was in today they mentioned it. They had that was the power unit, so to doubly compound him being a little bit stitched up by the safety car. He couldn't then pit later in the race for his tyres that were desperately kind of fading because there was an issue with the power unit in terms of it was dangerous for him to pit. I think it was like overcharged that wasn't. So he then couldn't, and then that allowed him to lose Hulkenberg to come in, I think, last sweep at the minute and steal the points, which is a shame because he had a very good race weekend. And through no fault of his own, he was unlucky to miss out on the points.
Definitely.
Just after the safety car, there was a collision. Didn't really cause anything. It just kind of compounded a little bit of issues for Racing Point. Perez had a collision with Hulkenberg where he lost his front wing. It kind of crumpled under the back of Hulkenberg's tyre. Perez came out and said that it was a steering issue, that he kind of, the braking balance had kind of ended up massively forward in the car after that restart on the safety car, and
something
he just couldn't stop and just slowly went into the back of him.
I would say that something didn't seem right in Perez's car. Definitely, Lance Stroll's not been that far ahead of him.
No,
really all season. So there was something there. So there's something to that, and it was unfortunate for him. I like Perez as a driver. He just hasn't got the car with him.
No, But your back Racing Point, they're always the kind of underdog that comes back. You back them to kind of sort it. They're just going through a little bit of a tough period in these recent races.
Well, Force India as a team have always had that, so it's instilled. It's that Racing Point is
instilled
still
in their
that.
blood.
Exactly.
They must struggle.
Exactly. That Racing Point has still got, as a team, Racing Point is still that Force India team. All of the staff that are there were at Force India. It's just a new name. So that they know how to make a good car, and it has obviously been financial constraints on them that has limited their ability so far. But I see improvements there that can come, and if it's the only team I would say that are likely to find improvements more than than Racing Point based on history are Williams, in need of them. But
and then I think going on to that struggle of Racing Point, the team that are massively struggling at the moment, and like I spoke about on Friday, the carnage of whatever the hell's going on with the Rich Energy thing, that then something else came out today. We'll keep you up to date on that, because I don't think anyone really knows
at this moment in
should
time,
I stay or should I go now. I think it's probably the best way to describe
at this moment in time,
sponsorship
no
deal.
one knows what's really. I don't even think Haas
You're
and
just
Rich
going-
Energy know what's happening at this moment.
They desperately needed just a good race, and after their recent woes, and then on the first race it was almost like a nothing collision. They've just bounced tyres, but somehow they've managed to damage their cars enough that they both had to retire within a couple of laps.
It is what it is.
And God, why didn't Grosjean retire for our predictions a lap earlier? Oh, why did it have to be? We got the right team. We were just out by the driver. Excellent. But
also, one thing to put in there quickly: shout out for George Russell, 14th in the Williams.
well,
Yes.
I have got that a little bit mentioned in the thing. We're now gonna go on to our quick stat roundup. I think I got these from the F1 from their special stats of the weekend. So that was Mercedes' 51st lockout of the top two, which that's getting quite an impressive number actually now of
Yes.
1-2 finishes. Going back to our point of how impressive Leclerc's been doing, that was his 4th third place finish this year. I can't really remember them from that. I'm not entirely sure whether
Third place
that's
is
accurate. It might be 3rd and 2nd place finishes, but it was,
third place. Well, he had
it was on the
Bahrain as his
official
first
F1, so I'm going to trust that they were
No,
right.
that
on
works. That
Works.
works.
Perfect.
I'm trying to think of them, but it
And
works.
then to prove maybe Christian Horner's point of the current form, Verstappen being the best driver on the grid, that after miraculously finishing, like we said, no idea how both him and Vettel managed to cross the line in the race, but finishing 5th on the day, that was his 19th consecutive top 5 finish.
Yeah,
One away from the big 2-0 in Germany, and
consistency's there.
you see it coming. Mad Max is gone. It's
Well,
can't
he
even
almost
think of
lost
an
it today.
iteration.
Well, this
Well,
weekend.
That wasn't
But-
his fault, but yeah.
But yeah, he almost lost it, but it's well deserved. That I said it earlier about the maturity that he's shown, definitely since Monaco last year, and that's testament to that.
And to show our point of how McLaren are starting to dominate that top field battle, that was their 4th top 6 finish out of the last 5, which I think is incredibly impressive, considering where McLaren were even last year.
Alonso is definitely regretting his decision, didn't you think?
I think so. And Lewis Hamilton's dad actually says he went too early. He'd like to see him back. So it's never going to happen. But sorry, Bottas, I'm sacking you off. Get Alonso in at Mercedes, and I would love to see that championship fight. Oh, they don't like each other from the McLaren days. That would be...
I still want George Russell in the Mercedes.
Oh, God.
He deserves
the future. Come on.
He
get
deserves
rid of
it,
Alonso.
though. He got 14th place, which yes was down to a few crashes, but that's his highest finish in Formula One. Admittedly, short Formula One career.
Did he get 12th in Azerbaijan, or am I making that up?
No, that's his highest finish.
Highest finish, so
That's
very impressive.
Williams' highest finish this season. So
Very good. But Alonso is my favourite driver, so I would just love to see him back in a competitive drive at maybe one last shot to get one last Drivers' Constructors Championship. So that's me being selfish there, but it's realistically never going to happen. Cry, cry, sad face. Boo-hoo. And then on to this man. Big weekend for him. We were celebrating Williams' 50 years in F1. I mean, to be in sport, any sport for 50 years is an incredible achievement. And F1 is the pinnacle of motorsport. And he's been there. I mean, obviously not always competing at the top end, as obviously this season shows.
No, but
to be within the sport that long.
I don't think necessarily when he started out, the expectation wasn't be winning all of the time. He
just loved F1.
He just loves the sport. It's one of those where he's found a job that is doing something he loves, which shows
people excel.
He's got his dedication to the career, and there's been a lot that F1 owes to Frank Williams. So
certainly,
it's definitely a big congratulations for the 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, there's a lot more of them.
Well, fingers crossed, with Claire at the helm, that the great Williams name can keep going. Hopefully, get more competing. We're actually going to do. We're going to release it on Friday. Look back at Frank Williams' 50 years in F1. We're quite excited about it now. It's been fascinating. Obviously, us being a younger generation, not being alive really through the, or at least being able to note the Williams dominance through the 90s and through the Nigel Mansell years in the late 80s as well. So it's been really exciting for us kind of going back and watching his amazing stuff, and amazing what he's overcome to get to where he is. But yeah, we're excited for that video.
It'll be a good one.
Coming out Friday. So guys, that is our British Grand Prix full race review. And guys,
we said at the start we weren't going to waffle, and I feel we did, but it's an enjoyable discussion.
We should rename ourselves F1 Fanatics, The Waffle.
The Waffling Fanatics.
All the Waffling Fanatics.
Get back on point.
We've gone off on waffling. Guys, hope you've enjoyed it. If you have liked it, give us one of those thumbs up.
Please comment and tell us what your favourite incident was or moment from the race.
Certainly, we'd be excited to do that and hear from you guys. Obviously, we'll be back. We can giving videos continuously over periods with that Frank Williams one next up, and please do subscribe. There's going to be plenty more videos from us.
They're going to be coming.
Hope you guys enjoy it.
Have a good week.
See ya.
Bye.